Hands off our gas stoves. That's what millions of Americans were crying this week when we learned that the Consumer Product Safety Commission, a relatively powerful yet kind of unaccountable agency of the federal government, floated the idea that gas stoves should be banned because it's killing people. It's giving children asthma, those gas stoves. Is it really? Or is this entire thing based on junk science? Well, let's bring in someone who just wrote about it at Townhall, one of our columnists there, Gabriella Hoffman, also a senior fellow at Independent Women's Forum. All right, Gabriella, I mean, as you put it, my kitchen, my choice, right? Keep your grubby hands off my gas stove.
Absolutely, Larry. And thank you for having me. People across the country, with inflation, with rising energy costs, the last thing they want to worry about is having to upgrade or trade, rather, their natural gas stove that's reliable for far more expensive, far more harmful electric stoves. So that is definitely a topic of discussion. And yes, it was
Yeah.
floated by the Biden administration.
It totally was, and then, what started this was a letter. When a congressman and a senator write a letter to an agency, there's a reason why they do that, right? There's weight behind it, and usually whoever's in that agency, they either salute smartly and charge up the hill and do what that senator and congressman want, especially if it's a Democrat, or it oftentimes these letters are sort of feeding the beast that was already growing there in the agency. It's like it gives them reason to do what they always wanted to do. In this case, it was Senator Cory Booker and Congressman Don Beyer, who's out of Northern Virginia. And they sent this letter to the Consumer Product Safety Commission and said, we think there are some very real hazards and dangers with gas stoves. Please investigate further regulations. And then what happened? This guy, Richard Trumpkin Jr., boy, did he take the ball and run with it.
He did. And in a conversation with Bloomberg earlier this week, he said, yes, we are entertaining this idea of banning gas stoves. You can get a $840 credit from the so called Inflation Reduction Act to make the transition. And if you don't, you support childhood asthma, rather, not childhood cancer. Want to be accurate
Yeah.
there. So that definitely drew the ire of a lot of critics, not just Republicans, but even Senator Joe Manchin, who was a supporter of the IRA. Believe it or not, maybe he has buyer's remorse now. He said that if they decide to proceed with this policy, that it may be time to reevaluate what this commission does and what it stands for.
Yeah, part of this story is kind of the gaslighting, if I may, that happened after concerns were raised. First of all, you saw people in the media and Democrats saying, "Oh, the Republicans now have a culture war against stoves. This was never going to happen. This was never." No, they really did float this idea. I'll read. You put the quote in your article. Richard Trumpkin Jr. said, "Any option is on the table. Products that can't be made safe can be banned," and that was specifically referring to gas stoves.
It was, and that was an attempt to gaslight us. And then he said, well, it's going to be voluntary. And then his boss, the chairman of the commission, had to jump in and said, whoa, 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 we're actually not going to be doing this. This is just misinformation. This is not going to happen. It's just one commissioner saying this. But Trump Jr. was very adamant about this proposal, and he doesn't differ much from his father, who was a very big labor proponent. And
Yeah.
it's interesting that he, climbing through the ranks largely because of his dad's connections, he now sits on this commission, which does wield a lot of weight if he's trying to plan, or was trying to plan rather, banning natural gas stoves. And then obviously the ensuing media commentary, it's GOP thrusting, GOP pouncing. Well, of
That's
course we're going to
right.
thrust and pounce if we're supposed to respond to this asinine idea, so might as well do it
Conservatives
if we can.
pounce. Conservatives pounce. By the way, you're being far too gracious to Richard Trumpkin Jr. He's there. He's a crony. He's the son
Yep.
of a huge bullying labor boss who used to run the
Yep.
AFL-CIO. He's only there because of his last name. And as a son of a big labor boss, he learned from his dad how to be an authoritarian bully and use his weight and power to try to force people to do what they want them to do. And in this case, it's give up your gas stove. By the way, this whole thing is based on a report, a study that shows that childhood asthma and other potential dangers are linked to gas stoves. But I mean, I've looked at this thing. This looks like junk science. It looks like it's one of those things where you can find a report to tell you anything that you want.
That's very much the case in this report. You have to look first at who are some of the co-authors, and then where did they get some of the backing for this support. So they show like some Australian university, and then two of the listed co-authors belong to organizations, one called Rewiring America, which is pushing net zero policies to electrify the country. Another is a woman who has no health credentials whatsoever, much like the guy from Rewiring America, and she belongs to a group called the Rocky Mountain Institute, which has an initiative for carbon free buildings. So this is all about climate alarmism, going net zero, which is very unsustainable. It's very costly, and electric rewiring efforts are actually exhausting more in fossil fuels than natural gas would. So it's very conflict of interest here. It's not rooted in any
Yep.
science, and a lot of people are very skeptical of health profession now. And now you have people who are not health professionals trying to decide what is best for us and for children in terms of asthma. And that's
Yeah.
where this study gets to be called into question. Actually, it should be.
Yeah, and in fact, you note in this column at Townhall, the authors conducted no measurements or tests based on real life appliance usage. I mean, I would think that would be the first step if you're trying to measure if there were hazards from gas appliances. Let's actually measure usage of gas appliances, but they didn't.
No, and actually, she admitted in a follow-up interview with one news outlet that there's no causal relationship established. This is semi-quantitative, our report. So I was
Yeah.
like, why are you scaring people and why are you misleading the public about this if you admit that there's no causal relationship between asthma and gas stoves, especially a high degree of it, and then also calling it semi-quantitative. So anyone can formulate a study. She can claim they can claim it's rather peer reviewed, and it's very subjective because we're straying away from the scientific method. So anything can be heralded as scientific, and this definitely is not scientific.
By the way, I mean this affects 40% of American households, yes, but it also affects the restaurant industry. You ask any chef, and they'll tell you it's got to be a gas range. That's how we're all trained. That's how we learn, and it's the best way to control the heat for cooking food. So you have to retrofit every restaurant in America. That's going to make everyone's meals more expensive. It's going to put people out of work. People who work at restaurants right now. Again, it's like they never think through the actual after effects of these huge, great proclamations that they try to make.
It's definitely a great way to fundraise and to give credence to your environmental donors. That's what they're doing. They're saying we're going to do this, give us some money, and we'll follow through with this. But in actuality, they may preach about this, they will virtue signal about this, but are they truly going to abandon their natural gas stove? Much like with anything, they won't. They've tried to do this with COVID, with mandates. You saw Gavin Newsom dining out, despite proclaiming COVID restrictions. They're not very
Right.
serious about any of these proposals. So I won't take them at their word, but they are very serious about suppressing all of us from having it. And
Of
yes,
course.
it is very popular among chefs. And why would we want to abandon a modern appliance that allows us to cook faster, to boil water faster, and be there in the event of natural disasters if you have to cook and heat up water? Electric stoves don't do that by any means.
Yeah, and you know who knows that best? All of those Democrat politicians who put out videos of themselves cooking in their kitchen. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren AOC. They were all using gas stoves. Gabrielle Hoffman is with us. She's a senior fellow at Independent Women's Forum and a columnist at Town Hall. And a lot of what you write about has to do with how conservatives are the original conservationists, which we are. And whenever we push back on this junk science that tries to sort of ruin our economy and ruin people's lives, we're accused of hating the planet and wanting to kill little children. But it's quite the opposite. We are our roots are in conservation, but intelligent conversation that makes sense.
Yes, we believe in balanced use. That's what conservation is. It means a wise use of natural resources and stewardship. It doesn't mean you don't have any impact. And we view impact on the environmental landscape in a positive way. We try to have positive contributions. We want to make forests better so they're less susceptible to high intensity fires. We want to ensure
Yeah.
that you can have a healthy economy and a healthy environment without sacrificing people's livelihoods. It's very simple. Conservation is conservative. And let's hope, let's say, members of Congress try to go on that queue and advance those policies. There's a huge opportunity for them to do so as well, and conservatives shouldn't miss out on advocating this.
Meredith and I were on vacation down in the Caribbean this Christmas, and we were down in I'll name the island. It was Aruba. All right, and Aruba is it's a Caribbean retreat. It's there for sporting life, water life, scuba, snorkeling. Right. We literally went on a snorkeling adventure to swim with sea turtles. And at the refreshment stand, Gabriella, they gave us our drinks with plastic straws. Kid
Hmm.
you not. And I said, wait a minute, why are you giving us plastic straws? That's dangerous for the sea turtles. And the people at Aruba said, oh, that's American bull. No one believes that. So I was like, this is a perfect example. I mean, you'd think Aruba, of all places, wants to protect their sea turtles, and they know that it's bunk. Gabrielle Hoffman, always great stuff. Thanks for joining us. More to come on O'Connor today.